You know, a lot of people say that sequels aren't very good, or at least most of them these days. Well, we got an awesome sequel today. As our friend from Irish Breakdown, Brian Driscoll, is back on Crain and Company. Brian, what is up, man? It's good to see you again.
Hey, thanks for having me on, guys.
Definitely. Well, look, obviously there's a lot going down with Notre Dame, Marcus Freeman, y'all getting in the playoff, bouncing back from that Northern Illinois loss. But first, for the people that don't know, we had you on a while ago after Brian Kelly had left Notre Dame. You had some things to say. LSU fans weren't thrilled about it on social media. So if you want to, I wanted to give you the floor. Not, take a victory lap if you want to, yay or nay, however you want to handle it. Can you just talk about right now the feeling that, that you're having with Marcus Freeman and the evolution of this team compared to where they were in the Brian Kelly era that caused so much drama before this?
Well, I mean, it's really hard to compare, honestly. If I could easily take some shots at Brian Kelly and talk about this or that, but look, Brian Kelly's third year, he went 12-0 and had Notre Dame in the BCS championship game, right? So, and it's a different era now. I mean, you've got NIL, you've got the portal. It's a completely different way of rebuilding your program. So, Coach Kelly's got to worry about his thing at LSU, and Marcus Freeman's got to worry about his thing. But I think the biggest difference between the two programs, and you could talk about whatever the reasons are, is the influx of talent. Notre Dame has done a much better job recruiting the skilled talent that was often in rare form. I mean, you'd have a Will Fuller, you'd have a Jalen Smith, but you just didn't have a roster full of those top-level athletes. And that's the biggest difference between this Notre Dame team and some of those past Notre Dame teams, like the 2012 team. Big, physical, strong, Manti, Lewis Nick, Stephon Tuitt. This team is smaller. This team is faster. It's just a different program. And that's really what Marcus Freeman has tried to build and what Al Golden has tried to build running in a NFL-style defense. And you've got just different athletes. You've got guys like Jeremiah Love and Xavier Watts and Christian Gray and Leonard Moore. It's just a different type of athleticism that exists now, and it fits the system that they're trying to run. And so far, it's worked. But now they got to go prove it on the big stage, because at Notre Dame, you don't become a legend because of what you did in the regular season. You become a legend because you win championships, and that's the thing that Coach Freeman has to show that he can still accomplish.
Well, that's a perfect segue to my next question, because again, we've seen Notre Dame put themselves in a position in the postseason to win a championship, and it kind of falter for some of the reasons I think that you just listed when it comes to an all-encompassing talent, not just big and physical, but fast and smooth as well. When you look at this season, where there's really, and we can say we want about Oregon. Oregon's the best team in the country right now. They're undefeated. But that year where Notre Dame lost to Alabama in the national championship, Alabama was so much head and shoulders better than everybody else in college football. It's a little bit of a different flavor of ice cream this year. But does the narrative change for Notre Dame if they're able to win one of these games in the playoff? Or will it take Notre Dame winning a national championship to maybe get over that hump that some people were worried about with Brian Kelly? And like you said, just getting to the dance isn't good enough. You got to boogie when you walk through the door.
Well, there's really two types of this, right? There's the hump that, hey, you belong on the stage, which I still don't think people believe Notre Dame belongs on the stage. Beating Indiana, as good as I may believe Indiana is, I don't know what your guys' feeling is on it. It's still Indiana. Perception-wise, a win over them is not going to change any type of narrative. You have to beat one of the big boys, right? And Marcus Freeman has done a lot of great things at Notre Dame. He's won 11 games against top 25 opponents. He's got some big wins, but 0-2 against Ohio State, hasn't played Georgia, hasn't played Alabama, hasn't played Texas, hasn't beaten those teams that you have to beat if you want to get on that stage. And yeah, they have some wins, a win over Clemson 2 years ago, but Clemson, this isn't the 2018 version of what Notre Dame faced when they faced Clemson in 2018, or even the version of Clemson they faced in the ACC title game in 2020. So I think you need to beat one of those big boys. And then the ultimate goal, obviously, for Notre Dame is to win a championship. But until they can go toe-to-toe with a Georgia, Alabama, a Texas, and Ohio State and win that game, right? And they've been close. They lost to Ohio State in the last seconds last year. They led Ohio State late third quarter in 2022. Georgia beat them twice in 17 and 19 by combined 7 points. But at Notre Dame, you don't get rewarded for almost winning or by losing by a small amount. You get rewarded for winning, and until they win some of those games, they're going to be considered what they are now, which is a good football program, but not an elite football program.
Agreed, 100%.
Brian, I got a couple things here for you. Let's start right there with Notre Dame taking on Indiana. Yes, Notre Dame beating Indiana wouldn't be the same as if Notre Dame were to beat Alabama. At the same time, this is a really cool in-state matchup. you know, I got to play against Notre Dame and Indiana, but I'm from South Georgia. I'm not from the state. Can you just talk about what it would mean for the Irish to beat an in-state rival like that, even if the brand isn't up there with, say, Alabama and Georgia and Clemson right now?
Well, I mean, if we're being honest, I don't know that beating Indiana is something that a lot of Notre Dame fans are going to view as some accomplishment. I'm not saying that's right, all right? I'm not dismissing Indiana. This is a heck of a football team. Curt Cignetti has done a phenomenal job turning around IUP. He did a good job winning at Elon and James Madison. But you guys know this. It's brands. I mean, when you were at Michigan, if Indiana was really good, would they have said, "Hey, I know we lost Ohio State, but we beat Indiana," right? It's always about that ultimate standard. And I don't know that Indiana would be viewed as any kind of special win other than, hey, you've got to get to that stage. And when you get there, you've got to win. And there's something that's standing between you and your ultimate goal. And so I think there's a level of respect within the Notre Dame program for what they see on tape. But I don't know if there's anything I'm going to be able to say to convince Notre Dame fans that this is a really good football team, which the film tells you is a really good football team.
Which I think is something that Curt Cignetti can take in as ammunition with him and say, look, we're going to be disrespected. We're going to be underdogs every step of the way. And we're still a really good football team. I think that's some ammunition he can use. You know, the other thing here is just holistically looking at the draw and at the bracket. I thought for the last several weeks, Brian, that Notre Dame was in a really good spot to get that 5 seed because they weren't going to play in a conference championship game. Either Georgia had to lose and pick up that third loss or Penn State had to lose. At the end of the day, the committee said, look, Texas and Penn State both risked it an extra week in their conference championship games. We're going to slide them back, which moves Notre Dame to 7 rather than 5. But as you're sitting here looking at it, I know there's a bunch of really good teams in the playoff, but you have to feel really good about the draw right now. I mean, like you said, you're on the side now with Indiana and SMU and Boise State and a Georgia team whose quarterback may not play the rest of the season. That could be your second round game rather than on the side with Oregon and Texas and Tennessee and the Buckeyes. How are Notre Dame, how are you feeling about the draw right this second?
I think it's a good draw. I mean, look, as I said, I've been someone all along that said, hey, I don't want the 5 seed if it means you're going to have to play Arizona State and Boise in the first 2 rounds, because practically speaking, looking at it from a coaching standpoint, you're going to have that really good game against a talented USC team on November 30th. And then your next game against a team that's like that, talent-wise, is not going to be until what, mid-January? You know, I don't know that that's necessarily the thing that best prepares you. And one thing we've learned this year, guys, is as we look at some of these teams that have gotten upset, a lot of times it's because the team hasn't really faced anyone that can challenge them for a while, like Texas to start the season. They kind of walk through that schedule. Michigan's not what people thought they were going to be. Some teams were down, and then all of a sudden they got to face Georgia, and Georgia had been tested already. They had played Kentucky. They had played Clemson up to that point in time, and the speed of the game was different. So I don't know if that draw would have been great for Notre Dame if you're actually talking about winning a championship, not doing the Lincoln Riley, let's schedule our way into the playoffs, but actually building your team to where you're having to compete. And I think playing an Indiana in round 1 does that, and playing Georgia in round 2 does that too. But again, guys, it's what I said before. Would Notre Dame get any national respect if they would have beat a 12-seed Arizona State or Clemson in the first round who had 3 losses and then beat Boise State or Arizona State and said, no, it'd be like, well, you haven't played anybody yet. This gives you a chance in the quarterfinals to see who you are, where you are as a program. Can you beat Georgia? And I'll be honest about this Georgia team. The second half with Gunnar Stockton forced Georgia to go back to what they should have been doing all year, which is get back to being that big physical football team that runs the football. And they bullied Texas in the second half of that game. Now, obviously you're going to have some film on Gunnar Stockton now, and I don't know how that's going to go, but this is one of those things where I think this could be a bit of a blessing for Georgia, because it gets them back to, it's kind of like when Ohio State lost JT Barrett, and they had to go down to their third string quarterback, Cardell Jones, because they had lost Braxton Miller in the preseason. It kind of forced Ohio State to say, okay, we're going to win with Ezekiel Elliott. We're going to get back to playing, bully ball a little bit. And I think that helped fuel them to a championship. I'm not saying it's going to happen at Georgia, but I do think this is going to help that team rally a little bit. But it's still Georgia, and Notre Dame's going to have to beat a really good Georgia team if they want to get to that point, then maybe get a Penn State in round 3. So I like the draw, because I think if you're going to win a championship, one thing I've always loved about football, guys, you have to beat the best. There's no Cinderella story like David. You look at the two title runs that John Beilein made. The first one looked a whole lot different when you're playing Florida and Kansas and teams like that to get to the championship game, and then the second one you're beating nobody higher than a 6 seed. right?
Yeah.
Until you got to the championship game, right? You want to
Dante DiVincenzo had something to say about that one.
Yeah.
he did a little bit, right? Jalen Brunson had a little something about that. But I've said this, guys. I made this joke, right? You guys remember back Ric Flair in the NWA back in the day? If you want to be the man, you got to beat the man. Well, if you're Notre Dame and you want to be the man, you need to be able to go through teams like Georgia and Ohio State and Texas if you want to get to that point.
Like
So
that point of
I
view.
like that draw.
Yeah, I like that.
I absolutely love that answer. I kind of want to get back to the game a little bit right here against Indiana, Brian. Who are some of your X factors, some of your guys in this game, and what role do you see them having to play for Notre Dame to come out with a win?
Well, look, if you're going to win a championship and you're going to beat a team as good as Indiana, your dudes have to be dudes, right? You need Jeremiah Love, Jadarian Price to get going in the run game. You're going to need that to be a part of it. But at the same time, the things that maybe aren't your strength have to be have to be better maybe than they were in the regular season. So you need somebody in the pass game to step up. And the one guy that I think has kind of flown under the radar this year, but as he's kind of come back from an early season injury and developing back from last year's knee injuries, Mitchell Evans.
Yeah.
Right. Preseason All-American, hasn't really done a whole lot. He's coming along here in November as he's now a year removed from his ACL surgery. You're going to need him to play like that preseason All-American that he was listed to be, that stretch where he was really dominant last year, because you're going to need somebody in the pass game, and whether it's him or Jaden Greathouse or Jordan Faison, to step up and say, hey, I'm going to be at my best in the postseason. And we've seen guys do this in the past, right? I mean, what did Chris Olave do during the regular season, and then all of a sudden he steps up in the Big Ten title game and in the postseason, right? We remember when Clemson beat Alabama and they fell behind 14-0. It wasn't Mike Williams that sparked them. It was Deion Kane catching a little screen pass and making a big play to help spark them. You're going to need those complementary players, and I think on offense, a Mitchell Evans, maybe a Jordan Faison or Jaden Greathouse can be that guy.
Well, speaking about the passing game, let's talk about the guy who's thrown it, and Riley Leonard, a guy who's improved week in and week out. How do you think Riley Leonard will handle the pressure of being on the national stage in his first playoff game?
Well, I don't know if this particular stage is going to be a whole lot different for him, to be honest with you. I mean, I don't know that the hype for this game is going to be any greater than what it was when they were heading down to College Station at the beginning of the season. I mean, when you're the quarterback at Notre Dame, that's kind of your daily life. That's just kind of where you are. It's not a whole lot different than going out in the Coliseum when you got the college football playoff berth on the line. They know if they don't beat at USC, there's a good chance they're not in the playoff. So I think that's something that it's one of several things that factored into his poor start to the season. Missing the entire spring was part of that too. But as he's kind of gotten more comfortable, and the greatest thing for Riley was understanding that this isn't Duke. I don't have to put this team on my shoulders every week. I can just get the ball where it needs to get to, do what I'm asked to do, and let those guys around me take over. And that's going to be the big thing for him. You make your reads, make the simple reads. If a 5-yard out is there, take the 5-yard out, right? Like, don't always go big, kind of that big play hunting, which sometimes gets him a little bit of trouble, and just trust your teammates. That's going to be the big thing for him.
Hero ball can get you in a little trouble.
Yeah, it can, especially when you got great sidekicks around you, and that's what Notre Dame has. We talk about the evolution of passer. Blaine, brought up Riley Leonard. We've kind of seen him evolve throughout the year, and we can sit here and talk about the schedule. We can talk about Indiana's schedule or whatever. But when you do look at the numbers, Indiana's one of the top teams in the country in stopping the run. So at some point, Riley Leonard is going to have to throw Notre Dame 2 first downs when you get in the red zone, whether it's off some sort of RPO action or maybe even when a play breaks down, keeping his eyes down the field. And to me, that's the biggest difference between him and Sam Hartman. We're going to talk on our show we talked about it on Wednesday, Quinn Ewer's lack of ability to create when the play breaks down. How confident are you and Notre Dame fans in, listen, maybe the play doesn't go as it's drawn up, but Riley Leonard's creativity, his ability to improvise and do impromptu things kind of gives Notre Dame a little bit of a different flavor of ice cream this year and makes them more dangerous.
Well, especially in a year where there isn't that big-time quarterback. I mean, you think about the last 2 times Notre Dame made the college football playoff. It was Ian Book, right? Nice, solid college quarterback. And his first year, it was him versus Trevor Lawrence, Kyler Murray, and Tua Tagovailoa.
Yeah.
His second year in the playoff, it was Trevor Lawrence, Justin Fields, and Mac Jones, right? I mean, there's not that level of quarterback in the playoff this year. And I think those teams that have that sort of playmaker quarterback, that guy that can do things when the game breaks down, can really give you a lot of problems. And we saw Jackson Dart do that a little bit to Georgia. We've seen other quarterbacks in these games where things don't go your way, and you can make plays, you can improvise, whether it's throwing on the run or running the football, which is Riley's been so effective. I mean, I think of that first scoring drive against USC, for example. Notre Dame's in the 2nd and 6, I think it was 2nd and 6, and they brought a corner fire, Riley Leonard sees it, makes the guy miss, and then runs for a first down. I mean, Sam Hartman is as good as he was and all the good things he brought to the table. He's probably getting sacked there. I mean, that's just kind of the reality. Quinn Ewers might be getting sacked there. As we saw, when he got sacked by, I think it was Chaz Chambliss hit him, might have been Jackson that hit him in the SEC title game, and he fumbles the football, right? I mean, you have that guy that can make people miss, can turn a 3rd and 10 into a first down. We saw it against A&M on the first drive. He avoids a sack, steps up in the pocket, scrambles for a first down, then gets a personal foul targeting hit, and moves the chains that gets him into field goal range. So having that kind of guy is great for an offensive coordinator because you don't have to call the perfect game, right? I mean, you have a guy that can go out there and do some different things and get you into the scoring zone.
Well, like I say, it's Sam Hartman maybe on a Head & Shoulders commercial, but I think Riley's Head & Shoulders better than Sam Hartman is. My last question for you, Brian, is one, and I believe it was Aaron Taylor. If I'm misquoting who said it, then please correct me if I'm wrong. Kind of took a jab a little bit maybe at Notre Dame fans in hosting this game, saying they need to get loud. They don't get loud enough. What type of environment are you expecting at a mecca of college football? Touchdown Jesus there, overlooking the end zone. What type of atmosphere? Will this be the craziest atmosphere in the history of Notre Dame football because it's a playoff game? And maybe because they view little brother could be coming to town?
Well, I don't know that from what I was 10. So from what I've been told by people that have been going to these games a long time is there's never been a crazy environment than Miami in 1988. That place was insanely loud. It was just a really wild environment. But, Notre Dame can get loud. And we've seen it last year against Ohio State early. It got loud. This year early against Florida State, it got loud before people realized this game was kind of over by halftime. The problem is it just doesn't have that same type of, standing up, jumping around, sort of loud vibe. It's, people say it's a little bit the wine and cheese crowd. And I mean, there's something to that, but this crowd gets up for big games. And that's the one thing I'll give this crowd for it. No, they're not going to sound loud when they're playing Northern Illinois or Miami, Ohio, or even Louisville, programs that maybe the fan base doesn't view as the elites. But when big time programs come here, I mean, David, I don't know if, when you played at Notre Dame, but I remember the 14 Michigan game that Notre Dame won. That place was rocking. When Texas came to Notre Dame Stadium in 2015, early in that game, when Notre Dame jumped out on that place was wild. It was going crazy. And we saw that in 2017 at USC. So it can get loud. It just isn't a consistently loud stadium, which is why people say it's not a tough place to play. But I've always felt the toughest place to play are the places where the teams are the best. Yeah, and there were some years where Tuscaloosa wasn't that hard of a place to play. And
True.
And when Mike Shula was there, it's it's like, look, Kyle Field wasn't all that tough of a place to play at times under past coaches, but when you have a good coach and you have a good football team, it's a really tough place to play. And that's where Notre Dame Stadium is right now.
Well, my freshman year was 2006 when Michigan went to Notre Dame. I think Mario Manningham had 3 catches for like 160 and 3 touchdowns.
Yeah,
pretty efficient.
He said that wasn't even my best day. I had better days in high school.
Yeah.
Only Mario Manningham could say. Brian, I have one more question for you. Since the college football transfer portal is open before the season is even over, which is wild, and we can talk about that. But Notre Dame has gone to the transfer portal for 2 of the top quarterbacks the last 2 years with Sam Hartman and Riley Leonard. Riley Leonard is a senior. Obviously, Auburn flipped Deuce Knight from Notre Dame. What do you expect Notre Dame to do in the transfer portal for the 2025 season?
I don't expect them to do anything at quarterback unless they lose a couple guys to the portal and then they go looking for depth. The reality is this staff views that their next quarterback's on the roster, whether that's CJ Carr or whether that's Kenny Minchie. I mean, that's the reality. The reason they went with Sam is because they didn't feel they had a quarterback that could be that guy. I know the staff was high on Tyler Buckner, but the problem is this is a kid that had missed 3 of the last 4 years, 5 years with injuries or because of the COVID year, not being able to play as a senior in California, goes down in game 2 of the previous season. They needed more stability. And then when Sam was gone and Tyler transferred out, it was like, we're not going to turn the keys over to Steve Angeli's not ready and Kenny Minchie and CJ Carr aren't there. And there's a guy like Riley Leonard out there. But the plan was always 2025 is the year that we looking at it from their perspective, that we start looking at the quarterbacks that they've brought in. And Kenny Minchie will battle for it, guys, but everybody that I talk to around the program thinks that CJ Carr's got a chance to be special.
Yeah.
And it's kind of time to turn the reins over. And you'll have a great running backs next year. You have a much more experienced offensive line, so it'll be a much better situation for him to take over than maybe this year would, where in the first game of the year, 9 of Notre Dame's 11 starters on offense were guys with freshman or sophomore eligibility.
Wow.
And so it was a much, much younger team. Then you put a true freshman quarterback or a red for sure freshman quarterback in there, wasn't a great recipe. for them. So I expect one of those two guys to be the guy next year, and I'll be a little surprised if it's not CJ Carr.
Yeah. Well, Brian, we really appreciate you joining us, man. We got to do this more often. It's been too long since our first time. It's going to be a hell of a game. Obviously, in your guys' house. Everybody go check out Irish Breakdown. If I'm missing anything, Brian, please tell me. Plug whatever you need, my friend.
No, it's just it's Notre Dame fans have been waiting this for a while, and we thought they were going to be in the first ever college football playoff in 2014 when they were undefeated going into Florida State, and they didn't make it. But I just think it's better when the blue bloods like Notre Dame and Ohio State and Texas and Georgia are part of those first ever type situations, and so it has me excited to really watch the whole playoff, but especially from a Notre Dame standpoint.
Definitely, man. Well, thanks so much for joining us once again, and good luck, brother. It should be fun.
Thanks for having me on, guys.
Hey, what's up, YouTube? Appreciate you guys being here. Please hit that subscribe button.